you just tossed into TV was a good investment. I said, well, how would you figure it out? And I said, well, I don't know about TV, but let's just start with the circular, with the Sunday inserts. Why don't we you have 220 markets. Just give me 40 markets at random, and let's just stop the circular for 3 months and see what happens to sales in those markets. And they said, are you crazy? We can't not do the circular. The sales force will go crazy if we weren't doing our Sunday inserts. We have to do them. They went on, they said, one time we had a summer intern in Pittsburgh, and this person's job was to do the buying for these newspaper inserts. And the guy was so incompetent that for like 3 months, a big chunk of Pittsburgh went totally dark. Okay, and nobody realized it. And when we found out what had happened, and the CEO found out, we almost all got fired. He was so angry that we had screwed this up. We would never try that again. And so I said, well, kind of joking with them, needling them, I said, so did you hire that summer intern? And they said, no, of course not. The guy was terrible. I said, I know, but yeah, at least he was terrible in the way that you're all too chicken to be terrible, right? Because I said, what happened to your sales in Pittsburgh when you didn't do the Sunday inserts? And they looked around the room and they said, well, that's a great idea. We never actually thought to look at what happened to our sales in Pittsburgh when we didn't do the Sunday insert. They called me back a week later and said, you're not going to believe it, but our sales didn't change at all in Pittsburgh when we didn't do the Sunday insert. And I said to them, well, great. Okay, so let's get going. Well, how fast do you think you can set up those 40 markets so we can do a real test? I said, are you crazy? We can't not do the insert. The CEO would kill us if we didn't do the insert. That was just the beginning of the lessons I was going to learn as an academic trying to go and talk in a business and study a business setting. And I think the things that have really, there are 3 or 4 things that have really leaped out at me about the difference between academics and business, which I think are informative for thinking about both. The one is that as an academic, I do absolutely nothing. I'm in the classroom 60 hours a week. 60 hours a year. That's why, so the week sounds more reasonable. 60 hours a year I teach. Otherwise, I do whatever I want. And it's a life of leisure, it's a life of luxury in which I am able to think about ideas all the time. And yet what's shocking is when you actually go to businesses, people have jobs to do. They have reports to file, they have customers to keep happy, and it's a very different mentality. When you actually have to do something, it gets in the way of thinking about all the things that you would like to do, all the changes you would make. I think that's a big difference. And I think that, I don't know the exact solution with business, but it's something to think about as a leader in business. So Google's solution has been 20% time. So at Google, everybody gets 1 day a week to work on whatever they want with no expectation it will ever lead to anything profitable. I don't know if it's worked for them. A lot of their best ideas, I think, not very profitable ideas, but a lot of their ideas that people pay a lot of attention to, like Google Maps, have come out of that time. The other thing that I realized coming in from academics is the incentives in academics to get published, to have to answer questions 100% convincingly. That's really the secret in academics. Take a question that's not very interesting, answer it incredibly well, and that's what rewards you in academics. Okay? In business, it's just the opposite. You have 100 questions you need to answer by the end of the week, and whether you have good answers or not, you have to give an answer. Time doesn't stop for you. And consequently, it's a very different way of thinking about the world. And when I started working with firms, I was terrible because I always was trying to get really good answers instead of figuring out ways to get just a little bit better, a little bit closer to the truth. So knowing a 55% certainty instead of 45% certainty was worth a lot to the business if it was an important enough problem. The third thing that struck me about businesses is that there was an incredible opportunity in business that didn't exist for academics, and that businesses create their own data. As an academic, I have to sit back, wait for the government. I'm looking backwards, right? I go and find some old data, analyze it, and see what it means. But in business, every day, through your customers, through your activities, you generate new data. Okay? And really the cusp, I think, the interaction of business and academics today is field experiments. It's in going out and using your everyday activities to learn. Because if there's one thing that surprised me about business, it's that businesses tend to make big decisions without a lot of information and without any mechanism for feedback to try to learn from what they've done. Okay, so whenever I work in business, I always try to figure out simple ways to always, every decision you make, have a way to learn within a month or two whether that was the right decision, and to try to set up every decision like that. And you know, I talk about, in being as busy as business people are, I think that often interferes with ideas. Okay, so a substitute for ideas is just having simple questions you ask yourself, like every time you do something, to simply ask yourself, in a month, will I know whether that was a good decision or a bad decision? Okay? And the way that you learn is you don't do the same thing everywhere, right? You figure out, you carve out 10 markets, and if you make a big change, you try not to make the change in those ones. You charge different prices in different markets. When you do human resources, instead of just hiring people, you actually hire people, and then you save the files, and you look back in a year, and you figure out who was good at interviewing, who was bad at it. Okay? Simple ways to try to learn over time. The most striking thing I've found, the difference between business and academics, though, is the following, is that academics come from a perspective of saying, I don't know. Every question I ask as an academic, I start by saying, I don't know the answer, how can I figure it out? I would say I don't know is the least common phrase in businesses today. Okay? I never hear anyone in business ever admit that they don't know the answers to questions. Okay? It seems as if everyone's job is to pretend that they know the answers to questions, whether or not they actually know the answers to questions. And the challenge that I would offer to interview is to actually try to utter that phrase at least once a day, and to the people who report to you, encourage them to utter that phrase. Because it's only when people will admit that they don't know the answers to questions, I think, that people can start to understand and ask the questions. Because you know, it's so many times, it's been obvious to me that if you would just run an experiment, you could learn the answer to the question. But people won't run an experiment, right? They won't actually get any feedback because it's an admission they have no idea what they're doing. Okay? But business is hard. Business is incredibly hard, right? It's so complicated, so much harder than what academics do. And yet, if you can never admit that you don't know the answers to questions, then you can never get better.